Awesome. Thanks everybody for joining us today. Super excited to be speaking with the fabulous Susie. So I'll do a quick intro of Susie and myself, and then we'll jump right into it because we've got 30 minutes and we want to keep this punchy and high impact. So Susie Trujillo is a fractional COO, strategist, and the founder of STRUC. She specializes in building cross-functional initiatives across organizations to support strategic direction, create execution frameworks, and design process automation and workflow enhancements using the power of AI. She is also a delight to work with, as I can personally attest to. I am Kinsey, as y'all know, and a growth marketer. I work with early stage technology companies, helping them build sustainable, scalable working programs. And the purpose of our roundtable is always to ask a question that founders might be afraid to ask, and then dive into it with answers from the folks who are best equipped to answer them, which is, in this case, how do we use marketing and operations together to drive growth? And there is really no one better to speak about this than Susie. So, hey, Suze.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to do this with you.
Likewise. I'd love to just set the stage and get an understanding of, how do you, Susie, define operations for startups?
Yeah, great question. So I think operations is, and not only do I think, I've seen this through the 10 years of being an ops consultant, it is the underpinning of everything that you do. It is the foundational how. So I think a lot of times when you say operations, people will think of different things and they usually think we don't need that yet because they likely think it's HR. Okay, we have a team of 6 people, 5 contractors, 2 devs. We don't need these robust departments that maybe larger organizations do, companies further along. And so really to dial it back into building a house, this is your insulation. This is the wood, the paneling, everything of the house. This is not just fancy wallpaper or nice curtains. So it is the how of how you do anything. So operations is the process that you do any function in the business. And so it's the glue that holds things together. And I think we'll talk about how the department, the business unit of marketing, can be supported by really good operations. And one thing I did want to mention too, for the early stage founders, one of the things I always dangle is I said, good operations is going to have an easier fundraise. It's going to make a solid data room. It's going to help you track who you need to talk to. So there are so many ways to optimize operations. Say that 10
Yep.
times fast. Optimize operations to help you do whatever you're doing better, faster, cheaper.
Definitely. And, one of these kind of stereotypes of startup land is that it's always chaotic and hectic and stressful. And there's some of that we're probably never going to get rid of. But really, in my opinion, that's typically symptomatic of, you know, fairly undefined or deprioritized ops. I mean, you can run a lot easier and better if you've got some systems and processes and frameworks that make, decision making not a pain in the butt and execution not something that happens last minute slapdash every time.
Yeah, absolutely. I always say to my clients that are running around a million miles an hour and doing 10 different things and context switching, I'm like, okay, let's bring it back down to basics. And we are not triaging lives in the ER, we are doing things that are important to us. And we can also, it doesn't have to be hard. It doesn't have to be stressful. We can be efficient. We can move quickly. We can kill it, but let's do it in a good way. Like you can get 8 hours of sleep. The famous VC podcast always says, of names we will not mention, there is no work-life balance. I call BS on that because I think that if you are efficient, you can absolutely move forward and be category defining and break things and unicorns and all of those things. But I guarantee you, if you were to ask those founders what made a key difference in their success, probably later than they want to admit, was good operational systems, because it's also how you scale.
Totally.
Throw in some good buzzwords: growth, scale.
Exactly.
It's how they did it. So we can dive into more of tips and things, but
Definitely. Couldn't agree more. So I've got kind of an idea that I want to float to you later. Don't let me forget to mention the phrase collaboration cost.
Ooh,
Um,
okay, I
yeah.
like
Okay, so
that.
we are in the middle of answering this question in real life, but I would, love to talk a little bit about how operations and marketing work best together to accelerate growth. I can kind of take a first stab at it from the marketing perspective. So,
Yeah.
good marketing programs have some built-in operations. We have workflows, we have, you know, systems, we have approval processes, all of that. Ideally, you've got some kind of strategic planning that's happening. Those are fundamentals, but that is operations. And when you get into how your marketing communicates with the rest of the business, that's really where the magic happens, I think. It seems to me that when I'm working with early stage companies, breakdowns happen pretty quickly, and that's like internal communication breakdowns. Part of that's remote work, but honestly, remote work gets a bad rap because this is a systemic problem that happens. How do you think that they work best together to accelerate growth?
Yeah. So I'm going to start foundationally quickly and then dive into marketing specifically. So if any of you are familiar with any of my other content, I talk a lot about my methodology called the STRUC method. And it's three foundational pieces. It's how you track progress, how you communicate internally, and who you work with. And I won't go deeply into those to answer this question, but that applies across the entire organization to every business unit. And I call each function a unit because it could be two people. Eventually, it could be a 100-person department.
Right.
So in this case, the unit of marketing still will rely on those three pieces. How you communicate internally. So when Kinsey, you mentioned the approval process. What does that simply even look like? Are people just pinging random emails together internally or Slacks? Are you having a weekly cadence of a meeting where decisions from the executive team, these big ideas, are being translated and given to junior people who will execute? Like,
Yep.
what does that workflow look like? And again, we don't have to get super complicated, but you need to have a foundational baseline to say, how are we going to do this? So I think there's a couple three. How you delegate the ideas and bring them to life. I think having strategic planning sessions are really, really important. Have it be a time bound, recorded hour or 90 minutes. If you've got a large initiative you need to launch, creatives, I think of them like racquetball. If you want that kinetic energy and you want to give them the space to come up with these ideas. And a lot of times I say that the founder archetype are big picture thinkers. They're the
Yep.
king, they need the general. Even more so in marketing, where there's a lot of creativity happening, but when you don't have certain parameters and guardrails to extract that magic, ideas become just that,
Yep.
unless you know how to bring them to life. And this is the department that always wants to chase the bright, shiny object and tying it actually back to business goals. So I always hate as the operator to feel like my most used phrase is no. So I actually used to be in hospitality many years ago, and we used to say, yes is the answer. What is your question? So we would never tell guests no. We would
Mhm.
just answer it in a different way. So I think there are ways to harness the beauty and the power of marketing, which is begins that life cycle of growth and customer acquisition. So to take it back down to the principles, figure out how you're going to take strategic ideas and create an executional roadmap. And that can be as simply as running
Mhm.
a formal strategy session,
Yep.
having that time bound, blocked out, notes taking, and actionable items out of that. Okay, as Deloitte's famous phrase, so what? We've come up with this idea. Now, what do we do with it? How do we bring it to life? And then add a very daily routine cadence hygiene internally. I'm a huge proponent of Slack. I think email should be for external conversations. And especially if you're in a marketing function, you may be one of the only units that is liaising with people externally. So I think even more, preserve that precious inbox for external conversations, whatever that may be, customers, if you're touching them at all, in tandem with sales, and have Slack be really, really clear on the channels where information is stored and accessed. So those are kind of some
Love
tips
that.
there.
Love that. And I think you called out a couple of things which are really important, which is that we absolutely need to leave space for the creative process and space for this kind of collaboration, big ideas. But if you can't take ideas into action, then they are useless. And I mean, useless is maybe too strong, but they're not that helpful. And what we're really all talking about here when we think about startups is how do we serve customers with the most and highest value as efficiently as possible to make as much money as possible and ultimately, dominate. Like it is not, it's not easy, but it's not complicated. And ops and marketing together really are, when you can get them in line, then you have a lot of opportunity for growth. I think some of this naturally raises the question of like, what are challenges that stand in the way of growth? And also how can marketing and ops work together to solve them? A couple of challenges that I see really regularly are that kind of death zone of ideas. People all over the company have big ideas for how to go to market and then how to show up in the market and connect with your audience. Those oftentimes get pushed to the side because of what are seen as higher priority action items. So I'm just wondering if you have any advice for like, and this might be relevant beyond just marketing, but that's one challenge I see. Do you have any like recommendations for how to kind of preserve those ideas in a thoughtful way, but still help like have ops be the voice of prioritization and execution and kind of all the good stuff that makes things actionable?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to get really tactical here, which I think is good because I always think there's so much content out there. Or when you go to a conference, I was just at the Women's Venture Summit, and you're drinking from a fire hose, and it's all well and good. But if you don't have actual items, I hope if anyone's listening to this live or on the replay, they're like, oh, I have at least one thing that I can put into action tomorrow. So I'm going to answer this question really tactically. And it's also an unsexy answer. It's first principles, as they say. These are foundational things. But one, having just a parking lot of ideas and then a cadence of resurfacing those so they don't just go out to pasture and then where do they go? They were in our head. They're not trackable. So wherever you're running a foundational project management process should also support the marketing function. So I run the STRUC method on weekly sprints because I like that cadence of every Monday, everyone has their marching orders. Let's touch base midweek to see where we are, get people unstuck, and keep moving forward really quickly and efficiently. But on those boards, and I like Monday, there's plenty of, Basecamp, Asana, we could go on and on. People also have been using Notion to create their own workflows and things as well. Regardless of whatever platform you have your daily, weekly tasks, and then also create that space just really tactically to have a big ideas, quarterly parking lot of things. And then I think also the ideas over time, even though they're in the creative space, will get more targeted when you have goals. So whether you want to throw out a 3-letter acronym, the KPIs, the OKRs, all this stuff, just distilling it down really simply, like, where do you want to be? It's Q4 started yesterday. So I had a lot of conversations with my clients last week and this week. How are we going to finish the year? What do you want it to look like December 31st as you cheers to 2025? And just starting really simply there. And then having that place where you're tracking up to those goals. And then also that parking lot. whether that's a document. I like it on the project management dashboard, whatever you create, because you're constantly looking at it. It doesn't feel like they're hidden away. And sometimes there's a circuitous route to get to some of those fun ideas, but you know that you're always taking it back to the baseline of, oh yeah, what did we want to accomplish today, this week, this month, or this quarter, and rolling
Totally.
those up. And obviously there's a process for setting those goals. But to go back to answering your original question, I would say just having a place where those ideas can live and can be accessible. And then when it's time to activate those, then, plucking them out and moving through that process.
Totally. Love that. I think you raise a good point there that, some of these ideas that surface, they're great, but not great right now. And so having that parking lot helps them be accessible to you when the time comes. Any other like ops challenges that you see that hinder growth? I mean, there's a million, but
There's
any
a
that stand out?
Getting stuck in approval loops.
Mm,
So I think there's two kind of profiles. The everyone moving fast, breaking things, don't ask permission, ask for forgiveness, kind of chaos, throw things at a wall, one thing will stick. And then there's the, okay, we have to do everything right, exactly, waiting too long to launch that MVP. What's the old
yeah.
saying? If it's perfect when you launched, you waited too long.
Yep.
Also, in terms of collaboration, I think that especially in a startup environment, and this goes along with hiring the right team, of course, but let's assume you have hired the right people in place. Then once you have a discussion about what you're doing, you have to be able to be a self-starter, run things to completion, and close the feedback loop. If you are assigned something, hopefully there's systems and mechanisms in place to help you track and know what is expected of you, back to the project management piece. But if something is discussed, assume it is approved because their communication is happening clearly, and then go do your job.
Yeah.
I think especially in marketing, things get stuck in that approval process of these little granular things. Have the baseline of the brand standards, the brand voice, know what your content strategy is. So every single email that you're sending, if you've got 3 a week, or every single social post, or whatever the tactic is that you're doing, is not stuck in approval processes, because you will never create momentum that way. So I do think that there's two profiles, and maybe startups can lean towards the first one, which is sort of like chaos. Again,
Totally.
there's the answer. But the second one is also relates to, the third pillar of the STRUC method, is make sure you have the right team in place. And I don't just mean experience, but also culture. And then that starts from just setting simple expectations. Even if you have a team of 10 or less people, make it clear what is expected, and have a place for that feedback loop to end, to say, hey, you wanted me to do X. I've now done X. What's next?
Mm-hmm. Something that you raised is around this like idea of profiles that I see a lot is, leaders in lots of different roles, but certainly in the kind of CEO role, who are quite technical and they're holding their baby very close. And that process can make it impossible for the approval loop to get out of the approval loop. So I would just caution that as an early stage entrepreneur, your most valuable asset is your time and your expertise. And if you are getting too in the weeds of certain types of processes or department execution, et cetera, you are hindering your growth by being a micromanager. And ops can help you get out of that. It can make it easier for you to say yes more consistently and more quickly, and know that done is better than perfect. I say this with love as a recovering perfectionist, but like this is something that I see a lot.
Yeah. Startup life will teach you to be like, okay, that is good enough, and then we can iterate forward. Which was very hard for me originally. Yeah, I think actually you make a great point, because I was thinking about, what are the key indicators of you need operations? Well, everybody needs it. But I see different profiles of clients who come to me, and after you have so many hundreds of discovery calls over the years, you end up seeing the same complaints. It's like a doctor, right? People come in with the same ailments, the same aches and pains. So in that case, I feel like I am a key unlock for startup founders. I'm the general to the king. The king has big ideas. I want to go conquer this land. I want to do this. I want to do that. And I'm like, great. How many soldiers, how many
Yeah,
arrows? Do we have food? Do we have water? All of those things. And I have this kind of superpower to help sort of extract people out of that and create these systems in place so you can be the best version of yourself. I think there's
really
something
cool.
where I do say that I like to turn founders into CEOs. And so there is some growth and development that happens, BS before Susie, before STRUC and after. And also we're each our own unique bird, and I want to create, and good operations should do this, whether it's me or anyone else, to create the space for you as in a startup founder, to shine, to be the best version of
Totally.
yourself, to that skill set. And then you hire around them and you have this sort of translator, this
Totally.
handler. If you have that great simpatico, that's where the magic will happen. So you can stay in your lane and you can be a little less organized. You can be a big picture thinker and all those things. You don't have to completely transform who you are.
Totally.
And there's going to be some growth and development around your own leadership skills, time management skills, which are all kind of a byproduct of basic business hygiene, that I like to call it, those just repeatable processes, like
Totally.
anything. What do you have to do? Something, 21 days in a row or 10,000 hours or something. And
Yeah,
but you'll make those incremental shifts.
absolutely agree. Okay, so we have gotten a couple of questions, but I have one really important one that I want to make sure we talk about, which is how marketing and ops can help you fundraise faster. This is something on the marketing side that's obvious. Well, we demonstrate traction, and we've got all, proof of product market fit, and all the stuff that you've got to have in your deck. But ops is overlooked often in that conversation. So I want to hear, like, how does ops help you fundraise faster, especially when combined effectively with your growth strategy?
Yes, I love this question because I have some advisory clients that I'm helping to do just this. Fundraising is sales. So you can pull on some really great foundational routines of how you would run a good sales process. Get out of the spreadsheet. Have a CRM.
Yeah,
These tools are built for a reason, to give you the insights and the data and the reporting that you need so you can be really targeted. Back to like a strategy conversation, not to get too deep in the weeds of how to do a proper fundraise, but from a tactical level, okay, well, what is your product? What is your company? What is your sector? Who's invested similarly? Who's your wish list? And then figuring out those pathways between strong ties and weak ties. If you do have that network in venture between founders or other investors, depending on, of course, what stage you are. So if you have already raised, then you have a starting cap table and you want to be able to leverage your VC contacts and everything, right? But back to the tactical application of this is in your CRM, there are capabilities to tag things, to be able to sort and say, all right, here's all my seed stage investors who invest in women's health, who, based on my assumptions of when they close that fund, probably still have allocation and haven't invested in a competitor. Whoop, we've now funneled this into a more targeted list. And then instead of individually writing emails, leveraging the power of a CRM to send an email that looks personal, we don't want to send a newsletter mailer,
sure.
but adding a personal anecdote and streamlining that workflow. And I hours and hours and hours of saved time. And that's, I think, one of the biggest pain points for founders is they're like, I need to clone myself because fundraising is a full-time job, but I'm also actually running a company. How do I do both? And I'm like, great. Well, we got to split. What are you responsible for internally? Do we need to hire somebody to take over some of the duties, chief of staff, operation systems? And how can we run this fundraising process efficiently? So there's the marketing and comms that happen, right? Great decks, whatever the process is externally
Absolutely.
for your raise. But then internally, those operational systems and the key piece, I always tell people, you can get a CRM for $19 a month. That is a sweet green salad. So get
100%. You can
that.
get it for free. You can get a CRM for free. But I love what you said. Fundraising is sales. Absolutely right. And the system that you just outlined is like account-based marketing and account-based sales. So there are already playbooks that exist for what this looks like when you do this kind of outreach, this very tailored, very targeted, very relational type of sales process. And I think sometimes the fear of just doing it makes it so that it kind of grows and becomes a little monster that you're trying to avoid. But the reality is like it can be, as you articulated, it's not going to be easy, but it can be a lot less stressful. The CRM helps a ton with that. Knowing exactly who you're messaging helps a ton with that. Having your team be coordinated so that you can ask your marketing folks to take a look at your pitch deck and make sure that it's actually aligned with where you are today. Like all that just, yeah, all of that just makes that process a lot more straightforward. And, you'll feel more confident if you're in that fundraising role and you know kind of what you're doing, when and why. You don't have to worry that, oh, I didn't send enough emails today or nobody got back to me because you have a program that you're running.
Yeah, trackability of like what is success.
Exactly.
If people are opening, and also from a collaboration perspective, if you do have a founding team and splitting the roles and responsibilities, you're not having to go, did you reach out to them? Did I reach out to them? What's happening? It's
Totally.
all right there. Trackability, you can see each other's emails. I wanted to give one quick example of where I think marketing and operations came together to be really impactful. And some people may know this anecdotal story from the founder of Brex.
Mm.
Obviously, they're a unicorn company, a darling in startups. I'm a preferred partner and customer. I love the Brex team, and they have done a lot of things right when it comes to leveraging the power of marketing and community and different things to grow that business. But one of the famous stories is how the founder at the beginning made lists of companies that were fundraising in San Francisco based on and he pulled all of this data, put it into a CRM, and he sent them nice bottles of champagne. So he had allocated a certain budget in the marketing to buy nice bottles of champagne, handwritten note to say, we'd love for you to use Brex and we'll hand white glove onboard you. And I think there's two kind of buzzy words that people like, founder-led sales, which is in tandem with marketing very, very closely at the beginning. And early things don't always have to be scalable. And I know my marketing brain is like, what? But this is something where, there was a big creative idea. Let's send founders champagne. But with the right operations, they were able to execute that. And that they were using a CRM, that they were doing building processes and systems and workflows to make that happen, and being able to order the champagne and ship it out and have the note, and then following up, and then getting on those calls, and then having the customer success team, which is probably one of the other founders, because they were probably 5 people at this point, right? In a garage, in a loft in Soma or something. So I think it's a good example to show that you can be early, you can be scrappy, you can be creative, you can be effective, but you could only do all those things if you do it with operations. And that's how marketing can be really optimized with ops. So I wanted to share that example.
Love that. I think it's a perfect segue into some of the questions, and couldn't agree with it more. And by the way, early stage acquisition is almost never scalable. It can't be, it's too early. So that is a little bit of a myth that I want to call BS on. Feel free to be creative and make these big plays as long as you have the systems to track whether it works or not. Okay, so a couple good questions. First one, Susie, what was one of your biggest operational challenges you faced when scaling your business or another, and how did you overcome it?
Yeah, I'll use a client's business because that'll be an early stage startup. Scaling a services business consultancy would have different issues. So to make it super applicable, faced a lot of different challenges, but one kind of overarching theme is the committing to an idea and seeing it all the way through.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of false starts. And where that comes in is lack of planning. Because I think that if you put an idea through a simple framework of, what is it? Does it accomplish these things? I mean, even looking at like a partner, I'm going through this now with a client and they're evaluating partners. I'm like, okay, well, what do we want from a partner? Not what does the partner want from us, right? But it's almost like dating. What are the qualities that we're looking for right now? And it was a simple 30-minute conversation that got us those parameters. And now they can use that framework in perpetuity. So every time there's an opportunity, they can funnel it through. And I think without proper planning of why you're doing something, you're going to have false starts and you're going to burn out because you're going to have to throw a lot of weight, figuratively, against sort of pushing and straining something forward when you don't have the systems and processes. So I'm a huge fan of never having to turn back around, thoughtful, intentional, but efficient and quick. This is not slow.
You're right.
And I think that is probably the number one challenge that I see, and the behavior that I end up having to correct as I parachute in to organizations and start working with them is this false starts and then not seeing through to completion and then feeling really burned out. Well, we've tried everything.
Totally. Totally agree. Love that. And it helps you keep the ball moving forward, which is really the momentum builder. When I think about marketing in its best form, it builds momentum and helps put brands on the map. And you cannot build momentum if you're stuck in approval cycles, if you are always having these false start moments. It's just not possible. You have to actually complete things and move on to the next. And so I love the way you articulated that. That's really how ops comes in. That's the challenge that ops solves. So we are at time, actually. There are some additional questions. So Susie, I'm going to float these to you later, and then we can answer them on LinkedIn. But I want to thank you so much for kind of spending this 30 minutes with us. And if anybody's interested, Susie, where can they find you?
Yeah. You're welcome to find me on LinkedIn and connect with me there. And you can also email me if you'd love to have, a discovery call or anything at Susie, SUSIE, Trujillo, my last name, which is TRUJILLO. That's a fun one. At Get Struck, struck with no K.com. And always happy to have conversations about tell me your aches and pains. But yeah, you can also follow me on Twitter, X, whatever we want to call it. And yeah.
And if anybody's interested, Susie has published a few great pieces on LinkedIn about her STRUC method. So I would highly encourage you to go check it out because they're very wonderful.
Yes.
All right. Thank you all so much. And yeah, this has been great. Bye.
Bye.